the other issues. So why don't you go ahead and proceed, Austin?
Yep, thank you so much. My name's Austin Gastrell. I'm the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development and Zoning Administration. I'm joined here tonight by Sarah Morgan, also in Zoning Administration. And we're here to give you an update on a zoning ordinance amendment related to contractors, offices, shops, and construction vehicles. And if I can ask to get it put up on the screen, please. So this amendment really started as a research project. It started following ZMOD, the Zoning Ordinance Modernization Program, and after that was adopted in 2021, the board asked for our office to open up a research project on the use contractors, offices, and shops and the provisions related to construction vehicles within Fairfax County. And the reason for that was that during the ZMOD outreach, et cetera, there was some concern, heard about these different provisions that may be impacting where these uses can establish and impacting where construction vehicles should be kept or how they're defined. So following that kind of directive, Sarah Morgan held a few community outreach meetings in December of 2021 with stakeholders, specifically landscape contractors at the time, and other community members to talk about the use contractors, offices, and shops, and to hear from those contractors and stakeholders how are they impacted by the current provisions in the zoning ordinance. And the feedback that our office got during that time was a couple different things. And one of the main things is that it was lack of suitable locations and lack of land, and some of that was based on these use limitations we have in the ordinance that I'll talk about in a minute. But and in the next slide, I'll kind of explain what the definition of contractors, offices, and shops are and who falls into that. But one of the biggest takeaways there was that the provisions we have right now were ended up pushing some of these contractors to other counties. It was pushing these people who are the people that we would need to come in and for emergency work, like when a pipe bursts, things like that. It may be having them establish in Maryland or in Fauquier County, somewhere where it takes it longer for them to respond to those calls. So that, as well as just concern regarding where equipment may be kept, were some of the main things that we heard. And those things were brought up to both this committee as well as the board's land use committee in May of 2022, and there was a white paper presented at that time. And on the May 17th board's land use committee, the board directed our office to take this from a research project to a full-on zoning ordinance amendment. And so, as many of you are aware, from May of 2022 until now, our office has been working on some pretty major zoning ordinance amendments, let it be landscaping and screening, parking reimagined, et cetera. So this amendment kind of took a back burner. And end of last year, beginning of this year, our office performed somewhat of a re-kickstart of this amendment to look at the amendment as a whole. And as you can see on the screen, winter of last year, spring of this year, we started another period of outreach. So we held 2 community outreach meetings that were open house style. And we've been meeting with internal community agent or county agencies that are impacted by this amendment, as well as meeting with certain community advocacy groups, let it be district-specific groups. For instance, we've met with a couple different groups in the Franconia district and the Mount Vernon district, as well as some countywide groups. And what we're looking at doing kind of as an overall timeline moving forward is that after tonight, we'll be taking this amendment to the July board's land use committee meeting, and then looking for hopefully an authorization of this amendment, late summer of this year, and likely board hearing and a planning commission hearing on this by the end of the year. So as I stated, the definition of contractors, offices, and shop is really a broad definition. It covers everyone from your HVAC techs, your electricians, plumbers, general home improvement contractors. It also covers your grounds maintenance groups. It covers landscapers, stonescapers, hardscapers, and your tree company, so your arborists that are coming in, cutting down trees, pruning trees, etc. The use is currently allowed by right in the C8 district, the I3 district, the I4 district, the I5 district, and the I6 district, and in the PTC district when shown on a final development plan. And I'll just say that this amendment and what we're looking at doing really, it impacts the C8, the I3, and the I4 districts, and we'll talk about why that is in a second. So as I mentioned, the feedback we got from the community was these use limitations impacting the use and where people could feasibly establish a business. And those use limitations pertain to the C8 district, the I3 district, and the I4 district. It limits the outdoor storage of equipment and materials. So if I've got stone or something like that, or if I've got equipment that I use as part of my contractor's office, it limits it to 500 square feet of outdoor storage. And it must be screened from view. And the other part of this is that the provisions of the zoning ordinance do not allow for the parking or storage of construction equipment or machinery, or any vehicles transporting construction equipment or similar vehicles, solid waste collection, tractor trailers, dump trucks, cement mixers, tow and recovery vehicles, things like that. Those things are prohibited from being kept in the C8 district and the industrial I3 and I4 districts. So what we're looking at doing and the potential changes we're looking at right now is to establish a special exception process to permit increased outdoor storage in the C8 district. So a lot of the feedback, again, that we got was that there might be a C8 property, let's just say off of Richmond Highway, that someone could go into, but the problem is they can only have 500 square feet of outdoor storage. So that doesn't really allow for one of these uses to come in and actually do the business they want to do there. They're then having to store their equipment offsite somewhere else, and they're still shuttling people back and forth. The reason we think a special exception is the appropriate way to go is because these C8 properties are really individual. When you look at out towards Chantilly and the Sully district as well, off of Richmond Highway especially, these properties really range from a half-acre lot that might have a small building on it to a full-blown shopping center. And most of them are abutting residential properties. And so what we're looking at doing through that special exception process is allowing for a contractor to come in, decide if they want to establish on the site, and give them an option to increase that outdoor storage to meet somewhat their needs, while also hearing from the community, hearing their concerns, and then hopefully, playing those or adding those things into the conversation when we decide to, establish a use on that site, and then letting the board opine on it. We're also saying that, of course, this material or equipment yard or whatever it would be would need to be kept in an area that would not be in a front yard. It would need to be screened or fenced, something along those lines. And then in the industrial districts, currently there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that allows for you to get unlimited outdoor storage approved in an industrial district through a site plan approval. And what we're looking at doing through this amendment in the industrial districts is permitting for an accessory storage area related to contractors' offices and shops, but capping it at that 10,000 square feet. The reason being is that currently in the I3 and the I4 district, a storage yard isn't a permitted use. It's not allowed in those districts. And so we think that allowing for a smaller area that is accessory to an industrial building, an industrial complex, a grouping of buildings, to allow them to keep equipment, machinery, materials in a secure area could be really viable for this use. And secure is a point that I wanted to bring up. That was another thing we heard from the community, is the desire to have these storage areas that can be secured because of concerns of theft. So this screen here, it shows kind of a comparison. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you see this blue area that's outlined, and it's about 3.5 parking spaces, and that's 500 square feet. So that's the current allowance for a contractor's office and shop to have outdoor storage in the C8, I3, and I4 districts. And this is not to mean that required parking should be used for outdoor storage. This is just to show kind of a good visual of how small that area really is. And then the left-hand side is a 10,000 square foot screen, fenced-in area that's accessory to an industrial building. This is actually located in the Springfield district, and kind of showing what we're thinking about doing in those industrial areas and allowing them. And in the top right, you can kind of see the scale of what we're talking about. The areas in the bottom left of that top right pane, and the building in the top right. So as I talked about, the C8 districts are spread out throughout the county, but they're really, there's some in the around Annandale. Most of them are around the Richmond Highway corridor, some in Lorton, Kingstown, Springfield area, and then a grouping of them out towards Chantilly as well. And the C8 districts, like I said, they're really variable with when it comes to the characteristics of the lots. And so this example here just shows a a C8 zone property off of Metrotech Drive that's your traditional highway commercial shopping center. This is, a large scale shopping center, lots of parking, and it backs up against residential properties. And then the next screen here kind of shows a more standard traditional C8 property, and actually grouping of properties that are zoned to the C8 district off of the Richmond Highway corridor. This is at Russell Road and Richmond Highway, and all the properties, barring the residential properties in this picture, are zoned to the C8 district. So you've got a smaller shopping center, also your smaller vehicle fueling stations, as well as some other retail uses, all abutting residential. And so, as I mentioned, in the industrial districts, this use is allowed I-3, I-4, I-5, and I-6. Well, in the I-5 and the I-6 district, you are by right allowed to have a storage yard. So really, and you're also by right allowed to keep construction equipment currently. So this proposed amendment really doesn't impact those areas, but it does impact the I-3 and I-4 where those things currently aren't allowed. So this screen shows you in green where the I-3 and the I-4 districts are. Again, some in the southern portion of the county, and then out toward the Sully, Chantilly area, and up towards Reston as well. So this screen just shows an example of our I-3 district. I-3 is light industrial. This can be anything from office development to our light kind of scientific research type medical research development. And then the next screen shows I-4 district. The I-4 district is our medium industrial districts. These are our, I would say that, these are our most variable industrial districts when it comes to what the development really looks like. It could be anything from an office development to all the way up to a pretty standard industrial area. And then this just kind of for purposes of example, shows your traditional I-5 general industrial district, our industrial park. And this is the Fullerton Road Industrial Park, which is next to the Costco in the Saratoga area, if anyone's familiar with that. And this is where, again, the use is currently permitted, and construction vehicles and equipment will be permitted to keep there as well. So you've probably already kind of gleaned thus far, there's really two parts to this amendment. It's the construction vehicles that I've talked about, and then it's the use limitations that pertain to the square footage of storage of certain things. And the other main portion of this amendment is that we're looking at defining construction vehicles, but we're looking at doing it through the creation of two new definitions. Those definitions would be light and heavy vehicles and equipment. So this is vehicles, and this is also construction equipment, because it's not just something we can drive on the roadway. This is things like bobcats, skid steers, track vehicles, things like that. We're looking at creating provisions that may limit the number of these light vehicles, and I'll talk in a minute what we mean by light and heavy vehicles, but limiting the number of light vehicles and equipment in the C8 commercial districts, and also allowing for the keeping of heavy vehicles and equipment in the industrial districts. So that would be in the I-3 and the I-4 districts. In those industrial districts, permitting the keeping of your traditional construction equipment. And then also we're looking at prohibiting the keeping or storage of heavy vehicles and equipment, so your traditional heavy construction equipment, in the C8 district, unless it's approved through a special exception. And here's the reason why. And my example with this is that if I'm a tree company, I'm an arborist or someone who has large stake bed trucks, something that we'd likely call a heavy vehicle because of length, height, weight, things like that, but they're integral to the use itself. So I'm, again, a tree company. I have, let's just say 3 or 4 or 5 of these large, stake bed trucks that may have a cherry picker or a man lift on the back, things like that. And I want to keep them on my property. We're proposing an ability to go through the special exception process as you're already going through it to increase the storage area to keep these specific number of vehicles. So this would not be a carte blanche approval to say you can keep heavy vehicles. This would be you can keep these 3 or 4 types of vehicles on your property, then allowing that use to actually establish there, and then cutting out the need for them to then keep equipment somewhere else and ferry people back and forth. So what we're looking at doing when it comes to the definitions for light and heavy vehicles and equipment, left-hand side of the screen shows light vehicles and equipment, and these would be defined based on length of vehicle, length of equipment, gross vehicle weight rating, which we'll talk about in a minute, height of vehicles or equipment, number of tires or axles, and then operating capacity. And the operating capacity is for equipment because not all things like a skid steer or a bobcat or things like that, they all have a industry standard kind of operating capacity. And we think that's a good way to kind of define these vehicles. And I'd say that length, height, weight, number of tires. These are things we already do in the ordinance, barring weight, and for uses such as the good distribution hub, et cetera. We have use limitations that already kind of mirror these types of provisions. And the weight rating, which I'll talk about in a minute, is something that other jurisdictions do as well to kind of define different types of vehicles and equipment. And then the heavy vehicles and equipment would be anything that exceeds the light standards, and then it would include things as well like dump trucks, solid waste collection, cement mixing trucks, and then tow and recovery vehicles. So, gross vehicle weight rating. As I mentioned earlier, we've been meeting with some internal county agencies, and one of those agencies is the Department of Code Compliance. DCC, as we all know, is our enforcement agency, and they're the ones that deal with complaints related to the keeping of construction vehicles and equipment, as well as maybe unpermitted contractors' offices and shops. And one of the biggest complaints we got from that department was the need for objective standards. And this was echoed as well by the community to have understandable regulations where someone, an operator of a business or an investigator, can go in and read the regulations to determine A, what types of equipment they can have on the property, and B, what standards they need to meet. So vehicle weight rating is a really objective standard. All vehicles that are titled through the Department of Transportation in I believe any state are required to have the gross vehicle weight rating on the title for that vehicle. So as an investigator going out to a site, I could open the door jamb if I was permitted to look inside the vehicle. This is going to be listed on the door jamb sticker of most cars. Or if I was an investigator that was not permitted to come onto a site but had to do an inspection from the right-of-way, this is something that could be gleaned from pulling a license plate number and making that objective decision to say yes or no, this is permitted on the site. So some examples that we have for light vehicles and equipment. This is just your traditional, just a truck with an open bed trailer. And then our light equipment, like I was talking about, this track equipment. So this is something that we'd be looking to permit to be kept in the C8 districts when in a fenced-in or enclosed storage area. Something that is below a certain height to where it could be kept behind a fence of some sort, and it's generally a piece of equipment that's going to be on one of those open trailers, and that's the way it's going to be brought around the county. And then your traditional just contractor vans and trucks that may exceed height limitations for being kept somewhere else, like a residential district. And I'll take this time now, I didn't mention it earlier, this amendment does not look to impact the definitions related to commercial vehicles in residential districts. So it does not have any direct impact in the residential districts. This is just the commercial and industrial districts. And then our traditional heavy equipment. I mean, this is what we're talking about when it comes to, on the heaviest side, but looking at things like excavators, dump trucks, front end loaders as examples for things that would be considered heavy equipment. But, we wanted to take the time tonight not only to let, this committee, ask us questions about this amendment, but also ask the committee, regarding vehicles such as this. This is a Dodge 2500, just very standard kind of work-style pickup truck, but it is equipped with a man lift, and it's a 12-foot tall vehicle. So is this a type of vehicle that we think should be permitted to be kept on a C8 commercial property? Or is this something that we think really would meet those heavy standards because of the height of 12 feet? And then another example is this. This is a medium-duty Bobcat or skid steer. It's something that could be kept in an enclosed storage area and likely would not be seen from off-site. But again, is technically considered construction equipment. And so we often do see these on sites for contractors, especially landscapers and certain hardscapers as well. So, again, asking the question, is this something that you would be open to seeing on those C8 districts, or do you think this should be kept in an industrial district? And lastly, like all of our zoning ordinance amendments, we have an amendment webpage. This webpage is kept up to date regarding upcoming outreach, regarding white papers, things like that. And on outreach, after we go to the board in July to their land use committee, we do plan on having another round of community outreach through public hearings once we have more defined kind of text to talk to the community about. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone here. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention to this, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.